Good morning. My name is Jonathan Taylor, and this is my introduction for my leading video that I will be doing. I've already completed mine, but I guess I didn't follow the time restraints that are required for the leading video to be accepted. And so I talked to my principal this morning, and we're going to basically, he's got a meeting that he had scheduled for next week, and he's going to let me give that meeting today after school. And so he already had the majority of it together. I don't know, he may come up with some stuff between now and then. He gave me the majority of the agenda a little bit ago, but again, he may come up with something else to add to it between now and then. So we'll see what we end up needing to do. But again, that's one of the great things about my school is that we're very accommodating. Everyone's very flexible. Gosh, it's just a wonderful place to work. You've got deals like this where I've got to have a video, or not a video. I've got to have a presentation given today, and these guys are very willing to accommodate and work around what I needed to do, and so I really appreciate that. And so anyway, that's what we'll be doing this afternoon. The video will be a staff meeting for just the high school campus. We'll be going over several things. One of the things we'll be going over is attendance. A lot of teachers, and actually myself included, but a lot of teachers are not taking attendance at the beginning of every class. They're either waiting, and it looks like they're either waiting and doing it at the end of class, or they are waiting and doing like maybe first and second period they might do at the beginning of third period or something. They're doing it like that, which as far as record keeping goes is fine. The state just requires that we do it, I guess, but well, I say that the school requires we do it, the state requires you do it that class period, and so a lot of these guys are needing to go back through, and actually we need to require, we're basically needing to reinforce that we actually do the attendance recording during that class period. It needs to be done at the beginning of the class. So we're going to reinforce that. So we'll talk about that a little bit. Transportation. We've had our deal for transportation is super easy. The actual process is if you use a bus or a van or a Suburban or whatever, you email the principal, tell him when you're going, where you need to go, and how many students you plan on taking. And he will, if he approves it, then he'll forward it on to our transportation specialist who will put it on the website, and you can check back on there the next few days and see what vehicle you're going to be taking. Super easy process. But it's kind of new. Last year, we didn't have to email the principal, or I say in the years past we didn't. We just emailed our transportation guy, and he took care of it for us, and he told us what we were driving. And so a lot of guys are still doing the old way, and they're not actually emailing the principal first. And so we need to be sure that everyone's taking care of that and doing it properly, and emailing the principal first to get approval. Plus, he needs to know, without emailing him, he doesn't know where all his staff's going all the time, and he needs to know what's going on, which is understandable. And so we got to be sure and make sure that that's taking place. We're going to discuss EOC dates. This spring is very, very busy, so we're going to discuss making sure that everyone is ahead of the game and sending their dates that they're going to be needing to be gone, go to contests for track meets, basketball games, FFA contests, band contests, anything that's going on, we need to be sure and let everyone know when those dates are, so that the school can plan around it, and we can all make sure that no one has the same days overlapped. We want every kid to be able to do everything they can, and if that means doing multiple contests, then we want the kids to be able to do that. So we need those calendars to be out early so that the kids can plan around it, and so can the school. But the EOC dates are super important. That is kind of the time to shine for our teachers. It's whenever our teachers get to go through and they get to enjoy and show that their students have done great things. And so we need to make sure that that everyone plans on being at the school during that time. We need to make sure that no one is that no one's traveling or playing a contest or something on an EOC date. So we're going to be sure that there's absolutely no sports taking place, no football, no basketball, no track or anything like that. We're also going to work on our days off. With the spring being so busy and people being gone, it's going to be hard to get subs. The substitute list is very short, and so it's hard to get subs and to maintain them. And so we're going to go through and make sure that we get approval before anyone takes off for sub days. And so we've got to make sure for days. So we're going to make sure that you can't take off on a Friday without prior approval from the principal, because Fridays are the hardest days to get subbed, because that's whenever your track meets are taking place, your baseball games, your contests are taking place. So that's when most of our subs will be used. So we're going to make sure that you get principal approval to take off any days in the spring. Well, I say any days. You have to get it any day, but you have to get prior notice from the principal before you can take off on a Friday. So anyway, that's what we'll be talking about. He's got a few more things that he says we may need to talk about today. So he will email that to me as soon as he gets it, or I'll talk to him later today. But for the most part, I think that will be the majority of the actual conversation. And so anyway, again, the school's being very, very accommodating, allowing me to give this presentation and give this meeting this afternoon on such short notice. Hopefully we can get this thing done, get it recorded, and I'll get my reflection done today. And then I'll try and get this thing downloaded tonight, hopefully. But anyway, that's our introduction video. Again, I'm just super excited that the school is willing to work with me and let me do this, and let me do it on such a short notice. All right. Okay. Good afternoon. Thank y'all very much for meeting with me today. I know that this was not a scheduled meeting. But I appreciate y'all meeting with me. I explained to Mr. Ashmore what the situation was. I had led a meeting at the beginning of the year, but I was short on my time for my requirements for the class. And so because of that, we've got to redo this meeting. And so I apologize for that, but thank y'all very much for being willing to meet with me again on such short notice, especially since I've got to get this done this week. So thank y'all. Here's the agenda for the meeting we're going to be having today. What we're going to be talking about is a couple things. This was actually a meeting that Mr. Ashmore had planned for next week in our weekly, or I guess it's we have a once a month meeting on Wednesday mornings. He's going to let me do it this afternoon. So I appreciate him letting me do this a little ahead of time. So anyway, we talked this morning about what I wanted to talk about. As you look on the agenda, we're going to talk about our attendance. It's more about our attendance procedures than anything. We've got some, actually myself included, some teachers that aren't doing attendance exactly like we need to. We're going to talk about our transportation schedule and talking to John Scott about that. We're going to talk about our EOC dates and ensuring that we have those down correctly. And we're going to talk about our days off. Actually, hold on just a second. I've got a list of the EOC dates. Sorry about that. The EOC dates, I've got them right here to give to y'all here in a second. The paper y'all have talks about it, but it doesn't actually have the dates written down. So we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about taking our days off in the spring, because we all know how busy the spring is. So to begin with, on our attendance procedures, we need to see, the state says we have to take attendance every single class period at the beginning of the class. So we need to be sure and do that. Some of us, and I think I'm probably one of them occasionally, we'll go through, and as we're busy, we won't take attendance at the beginning of the day or at the beginning of the class period. We'll wait and take attendance. You know, you might have an off period, fourth period, and so you might go through and not take attendance for the first 3 class periods and then do them all at one time. That's fine as far as the school's attendance records, but for the state rules say that we have to actually take attendance at the beginning of every single class. And so we need to do a better job of doing that every single day. But when the kids are walking in, before you start your lesson for the day, we need to go through and we need to start taking attendance at that time. So at the very beginning of class, we've got to take our meeting. We've got to take our attendance then. Okay? Does everyone understand that? I mean, it's pretty simple. Does anyone have any questions? Okay. Well, that applies to me more than anyone, really. I'm the world's worst about being out in the shop. We'll be working on stuff. I'll let the kids leave right at the end of class, and then the bell rings and the kids walk in, and we never even go in the classroom. And so we'll stay out in the shop, and I'll do that, and I'll do that for 1 or 2 class periods in a row, and then come take my attendance later, which, again, we all need, especially me, we all need to do a better job of that, of taking attendance on a regular basis at the beginning of every single class. Part of that is because the state tells us to, and the other part is, and I can account for this, and if you ask Ms. Formani, she'll tell you occasionally Since I don't have those kids in the room, sometimes I'll forget and I'll count someone here that was actually absent because I'm not looking at them, and I don't sit there and look at them. I just am trying to remember, and so I've messed up a time or two. And so when we do that, we mess up the attendance for the rest of the day because Mr. Ashmore's doing a really good job of ensuring that our tardies are correct, that kids are staying in class on time, and that kids are actually showing up every day. And if we're not taking our attendance properly, he can't do his job either. So we need to be sure and do a better job about that. Okay. The second thing is transportation. We've got an actual sheet. Here's our little handout. The procedures for going through and doing our transportation. It's fairly simple. We started this at the beginning of the year, but it's just something we need to continue doing. A couple of us, from what I understand, are still not doing this quite exactly right. For our attendance, for our transportation, what we've done in the past is all you had to do was email John Scott. I think he always said a week ahead of time, but we need to email John Scott ahead of time and let him know where we were going, how many people we were taking, and when we were going. We just kind of had to give him that stuff and give him our list. And so, like for me, I'd go through and I'd give him an email of all of my days that I was going to be gone for the whole spring, and I'd do it in one email and I'd just send it to John. He'd put it on the transportation deal, and that was all there was to it. And when we did that, it worked fine, but Mr. Ashmore has a really hard time keeping up with who's going to be gone when and why we're going to be gone because we're not sending him that same email. And so in order to make sure that we're taking account of all of that, we've got to be sure and send those emails to him first now. And so at the beginning of the year, we started doing this, and we need to continue doing so. We need to send Mr. Ashmore an email initially and tell him all that same information. So your email needs to have where you're going to go. It needs to have the date that you're going to be going. If you're going to be gone a full day, a half day, whatever time you're going to be leaving, a time that you're leaving and a time that you're returning. And it needs to have where you're going, and maybe most importantly is how many kids you're going to be taking. That's what John Scott needs to know if he needs to give you a car, a van, a Suburban, or even a bus. And so don't necessarily put on your email that I need a bus. You need to be sure and tell him how many kids you're taking, because that lets him know if you're going to be taking 12, he may give you the van instead of the bus. Because he's got all of us over the spring are super busy, and he's going to ensure that the vehicles get to everyone's place so we can all go. But he needs to know how many kids we're taking so he can give each person the proper vehicle. Okay. What we also need to be able to do is get those to him early. Mr. Ashmore is going to get that email. He's going to look at it, and then he's going to forward it on to Mr. Scott. But he may not do it in that same day. He may look at it, look at the other ones, and compare and make sure we can get a sub and everything for you, and decide if it's what you're going to be doing is something that is worthy of a sub type deal. So we need to be sure and send it to Ashmore first, and then he'll forward that to John Scott for us. And so that's kind of a new thing for us. Any questions about that?
Where's y'all's link located?
Yeah, I didn't even mention that. I'm sorry. There's a link. Matter of fact, I've got it right here, and I can show you. Let me pull this up for you. There's a link on the school website that shows you the transportation schedule. I was talking to Ms. Formonte the other day, and I guess there's some teachers that didn't know this. And so we need to actually be sure and know where that link is. It's on the school website. And as soon as this thing pulls up, it's going to show it to us. I'm glad you mentioned that because I did have this link pulled up ready to go and show you. Let's see. Once this thing heats up and gets it on there. Okay. So once you've emailed Mr. Ashmore, he's going to forward that email to John Scott once he approves it. And then once John Scott gets it, he's going to decide which vehicles we need to take. And he's going to decide, let me get this tilted to where you can see the, yeah, turn it off, please. Okay. He's going to decide which vehicle each person needs to take instead of just deciding, instead of you deciding what vehicle you need to take, John Scott's going to. So, I know this is easy for everyone else to see, but I don't think the computer's picking this up very well. But that's going to have to be okay, I guess. So when you go to the school website, of course, everyone knows it. go to the school website, and over here on the right, let me scoot this over to where you can see it better. If you go over here on the right, goodness. Okay. You're going to go over here on this list that's right here. You're going to scroll down. You're going to go to transportation schedule right here. Click on the transportation schedule, and this goes through and shows you exactly which vehicle. So it says, for instance, let's see, the next thing we've got coming up is the 18th, which is tomorrow, I think, right? The Amarillo elementary counselors are going to Amarillo, and she's taking the 2007 Dodge van. That's what DV, Dodge van. It says what time she's leaving, and it says, what time she's leaving, and I think, it just says staff. If you're taking students, actually I think the staff is over here telling you who's driving, because a lot of times it's important for John to know who's driving. If it just says, because there's only so many of us that are actually legal to drive a bus, and so it's important that we let him know who's going to be going so he can determine if we're legal to drive a bus or if we need to take a different vehicle. So I'm going to do it one more time so everyone knows how to do it. You're going to go, let's put this back over. Okay, you're going to go home. So you'll go to the school webpage, and then once you're on the school webpage, it's just right. We take our attendance right over here. Instead of going to that, you're just going to scroll down these blue letters, and you're going to go to transportation schedule. Click on it, and then it's going to pull up and tell you who's taking it, which vehicle you're taking. The 13, the way John does the numbers, for the buses it's different, but for all the vehicles it says, like this one says 13CB. So it's a 2013 cargo van, which it's actually passenger van. But that's the big van. The 2010 sub, it's a Suburban 07 Dodge van. The 19 and 21 are the buses, and they're all labeled. Beyond that, you just need to know which vehicle you're taking. So it's important that we look on that schedule after you've emailed John, give him 2 or 3 days, and look on that schedule to make sure that your request has been put in and it's actually on there. Because sometimes he gets busy too, and sometimes he doesn't get those things taken care of as quick as what you might think he needs to. He always does it, but that doesn't mean it's on your time schedule. So it's important that after you've sent that email, that you go through and you double check on the school website and make sure that your name and your trip is actually on the transportation schedule. Does that answer your question about the transportation deal?
Yes.
Okay. Like I say, a lot of people didn't know that was there. I talked to, I guess it was Miss Waters the other day, and she did not know that was on there also. Typically, those of us that take, the coaches and me and a few others are the ones that take trips all the time, and so of course we know that that's where we need to go to look at that. But that's for everyone to know. Okay. All right, moving on. The next thing we're going to look at is our EOC dates. We gave a list. Matter of fact, here's a list of those dates. There you go. If you'll pass those out for me. Those EOC dates are really important to us. We need to be sure and know when they are. Matter of fact, this is my actual calendar. And on my calendar, I've written down the EOC dates. Now, the reason I did that, and this is something that Ashmore has stressed to us through email, but he wanted to be sure and stress this today as well. I've got the list of all of my competitions we go through. As y'all know, as the ag teacher, the FFA advisor, we go to stock shows, judging contests, speaking contests. We go to contests all the time. The stock shows go through, and they intentionally plan the stock shows to where it's not on top of the EOC days. And so that's never been a problem. However, a lot of our contest days, they don't avoid that. And so we've actually had some problems in the past. Baseball's a problem sometimes. Tennis, even golf. There's so many different things because the spring is just so busy. But because of that, we've got to ensure, and we need to plan ahead on this. Coach Williams does a really good job whenever he schedules all of our district games and everything, and our baseball games, to make sure that we're not on top of an EOC date. However, whenever they start looking at tennis meets and golf tournaments and FFA competitions, sometimes those other guys aren't quite as conscientious about making sure they're not on top of EOC days. So our district policy, our campus policy, is that we do not travel on an EOC day. So that means if there is, for instance, we've got on March the 29th, we have the EOC English 1, and then on March the 31st, we have the EOC English 2. Okay, so if we needed to go somewhere March the 29th, the district says that that's acceptable as long as we leave after school, okay, because there's not an EOC the next day, and we're not going to end up missing or interfering with that EOC. However, if we have a contest on the 29th, we're not going to go. That's a Tuesday, so there could be a golf tournament or there could be any kind of contest that day. We are not going to go to that contest the same day of the EOC. Now, what we also need to know is on the 31st is the EOC English 2, okay? That's first thing in the morning. So if we have a contest on the 30th, it's going to be a little bit more questionable, because if it's in the afternoon and they get home early, then we're going to let you go. If it's one of those things where you're going to have to travel and go somewhere to go to it, we are not going to go to that contest. We want the kids home early the day before the EOCs so that they can get a good night's rest and be prepared for the test the next day. So if it is a contest the day of the EOC or the day before the EOC, you need to get, well, the day of we're not going to go. The day before, you need to talk to the principal and get approval before you decide to go or try to go. But he's going to ask you what time will you get home, and that's very important. The reason we do that, and I'm the world's worst because we've got contests that conflict with EOC days all the time, and I hate to not go, but I understand why we don't. The reason we don't, and this is the way it was explained to me by our superintendent. He said that our English teachers and science teachers and math teachers, that these EOC days are basically like their district football games. That they get one shot at this thing. They've worked all year towards it. They've prepared these kids as best they can, and they've got these kids ready to go. And it's really important that those kids on that day are as prepared as they can be, and they are ready to give their best. So it's super important to them that we do that. So we need to be able to support the school, and that doesn't need to be a problem for us. And that's something that initially I had an issue with myself, because, the less contests you go to, for me, there's only so many contests we can go to. For dairy cattle or for land or whatever, there's only 4 or 5 contests we can go to anyway before our actual area contests. And so I want to go to every single practice contest we can to be as prepared as we can. But I also know that we're here to teach these kids, and the state tests, there's part of it, and I understand. That's how we get our school funding, and that's what we do. And so we all need to be accommodating to that and be prepared to not go to those contests. Okay. Does anyone have any questions about that? Okay. I mean, that's fairly simple. The main thing is we cannot go, as a district, we're not going to go to any contest on the day of an EOC. And if you have something the day before an EOC, you need to basically ask Mr. Ashmore before you leave. He's basically going to tell you if it's during the day, that's fine. Probably. If it's in the evening, it depends on what time you get home. The other side of that is it depends on which kid you're taking. If it's a kid that is struggling and might need that one more day of instruction to go through and talk to the teacher, then he still may not let you leave, depending on the student. It's a super important thing, and like I say, it's something we need to stress more than what we do, because y'all do a great job of teaching. I'm one of the guys that doesn't get tested, and so sometimes I think we overlook that. Some of the coaches and myself and the band teachers, sometimes I think we overlook that. But you guys that are teaching, it's super important that we are prepared for that, and that we support y'all, and that we make sure we're here. So hopefully there's no conflicts or questions about that. If they are, see Mr. Ashmore later. But if you want to go somewhere on the day of an ELC, the answer is going to be no. Okay. All right, moving on. The days off. We've been talking about the whole time. We've been talking about how busy the spring is. We've got kids that are gone all the time. We've got teachers that are going to be gone. I'll be gone traveling. Our coaches will be gone on Thursdays and Fridays a lot for track meets and for baseball games and for basketball games that are still going on, for tennis, for golf, Gosh, what other contests have we got that we'll have kids going for? Can you think of anything else?
Mm-hmm.
I think the band's got. We had some kids that qualified for state. Mr. Mixon had some kids qualify for state in the band ensemble, and so we're gonna have some kids that are gone a lot. And when the kids are gone, obviously that means that we're gonna have some teachers gone also. So that means we need to be conscientious of that. And y'all have all taken off, and you know how it is whenever you go tell Rainey that you've got to take a day off. She doesn't ever. She's never upset with you, but it's always kind of a hassle because our substitute list is so short that it's always a struggle to find someone to cover our classes for us. So this is going to be a district-wide policy, not just at the campus level, because each and every campus, elementary, junior high, and high school, every campus is having the same struggle with our substitutes. And so what we're going to do is if you would like to take a personal day on a Friday or a Monday, then you need to contact your principal ahead of time. Normally, our typical procedure is if you need to take off, if it's for a school-related issue, you email Rainey and Mr. Ashmore. He'll approve it, and she'll go through and get you a sub. Simple thing. If it's a personal day, then you've normally gone in there and you've talked to Rainey, told her what you're going to do, what day it was, and she's gotten you a sub. However, because we've got our substitute list just continues to shrink. 3 years ago, I think that Mr. Ashmore said, I think this is right. I think that you said we had 15 on the substitute list, and now I think we're down to 9, and that's district-wide. So it's easy on a Friday for us to have 9 teachers gone, easily. One track meet will take out 4 or 5 coaches. And so if we have something like that happening, then if you're wanting to take a personal day, it's going to have to be prior approval. Now, if you've got something set up and you've got an appointment that you can't change, they're going to do their best to work with you every single time. They're going to do their best to work with you, from what I understand. But it's something that if you're just wanting to take a day off because you're wanting to go fishing that day, or if your wife's wanting to go do something, or whatever the deal is, you need to be sure and ask for prior approval. That being said, if you don't have something that's really important, then just don't ask. Try and take off. If it's something that you're wanting to go to Amarillo to go shopping, then maybe you should do that on a Wednesday or on a weekend instead of asking to do it on a Friday, just because it's such a hard time to get our substitutes. I think from what I understand, when I talked to Mr. Ashmore before the meeting, it's less about wanting to control where we go and trying to do all of that, and more about making sure we have the people in place to cover our classes, because we just don't have the people to cover our classes right now. I know that whenever I leave, I try and give Rainey as much time as I can for her to find someone, but it's a struggle each and every time for her to find a substitute. And it's the same thing for all the rest of us, especially you core teachers that are teaching to the EOC and are making sure that our kids are prepared. For me, if I leave them some stuff, it's not as big of a deal as if Mrs. Thayton was gone and she's got a math lesson that the kids have to learn that day. We need one of our better substitutes to cover her, and there's not very many that are really, really good substitutes. We've got, I think, 3 that they would say could kind of come in and teach our classes for us, and they're all just retired teachers. And you know who they are. You're the ones that always request those same people over and over, because we all want the best ones. But there's just not very many of them. And so, again, our district policy is going to be, if you're going to be gone on a Friday or a Monday, around the weekend, you need to be sure and talk to your principal, or to Mr. Ashmore, before you put in to take off. Before you even fill the paperwork out with Rainey, you've got to talk to Mr. Ashmore. Do you have any questions about that?
So we can't take off on Fridays at all? I mean,
No, that's...
So what you're trying to say?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I appreciate the question. What that means is, if you need to take off on a Friday, don't just assume you're going to get off, okay? So rather than in the past, you've just assumed you've set up a doctor's appointment on a Friday, and then you came in on Thursday after school and turned your deal in and said, hey, I need to be gone tomorrow. We can't do that. If you do something like that, then we probably will not be able to cover you with a sub, and so it's going to put everyone in a problem. We're trying to get away with situations like that. Now, if you call and your child is sick or you wake up throwing up Friday morning, it's just what it is. We're going to have to find someone to cover you. But if you've got something planned and you've got a trip or you've got a doctor's appointment or something like that, the school's just asking that you try and plan that on a different day. Don't do it on a Friday or a Monday, because those are the days that we have the hardest time finding subs. So you can take off on those days, but don't just assume you're going to get off. If you have something going, don't come in Thursday or even the week of and say, hey, I need the sub tomorrow. Ask ahead of time, and then they will go from there. And if you're at a doctor's office and you're setting up your next appointment, instead of setting it for Friday, set it for a different day, if it's at all possible. That's going to be really hard for us to find a substitute for you that day. Everybody understand? Is that good? Okay, so the school's not saying you can't take off on Fridays or Mondays. They're saying get approval before you do, because we just don't have enough substitutes to cover all of that. I've taught at some other schools, and most of y'all can account for this. Like at Plainview where I taught, you couldn't take off on a Friday or Monday all year. That's just the way it was. Unless you had something major going on, they would not let you take off on a Friday. They just wouldn't let you do it. Unless you called in and you were sick that morning and said, hey, I can't do it, then they just would not let you leave. And so that's just part of it. But that's what we're going to start doing from here on. And so unless you've got something going, uh-oh, my computer tried to die on me. All right. Unless you've got something going super important, or that's an emergency type deal on a Friday morning, then otherwise you need to be sure and let the school know ahead of time. Okay. All right. So we're going to go back over what we talked about. Just a quick summary. The first thing we talked about today was our attendance. As a school, especially as a campus, we need to do a better job of taking our attendance at the beginning of class. Again, when the kids come in, within the first 5 minutes or so is what they always suggest, or that's what Mr. Ashmore even suggests. The first 5 minutes of class is whenever you need to take your attendance. If you do that, because our attendance policy, I didn't mention this earlier, our tardy policy, and y'all know this, but our tardy policy is if you come in there and if I'm late for a class, you're going to go through and you're going to mark your attendance within the first 5 minutes. And y'all know this, if the kid's more than 15 minutes late, then they're actually counted absent for the day. Less than 15 minutes, they're tardy. Okay, everyone knows that? So if a student comes in and we take our attendance the first 5 minutes of class, then all we've got to do is, again, you're going to send Rainey an email afterwards and tell her, Mr. Taylor was absent today. Well, actually, let me rephrase that. You're going to send her an email and say Mr. Taylor was tardy today. So you're going to count him. You're going to count me absent on your roll sheet, and then send her an email after I show up late and tell her that I was tardy. And that's how we're going to count our tardies. However, if you take your attendance at the end of the class and you count me absent, and then you text her or you email her that I was tardy, well, it's going to throw everything off, because they sit there and they're pulling those at the beginning of every single class to see who needs to go to break detention and lunch detentions both. And so if you're right before break or right before lunch and you do it at the end of class, then those kids are not going to go to detention today. It'll be the next day if they catch it. So it's really important that we get those done at the right time. Okay, our transportation is the next thing we talked about. Remember, we have to email Mr. Ashmore first before you plan on going or doing a vehicle request. We've still had several teachers that actually email John Scott and don't email Mr. Ashmore at all, and that's a problem. We've got to email Mr. Ashmore first. Mr. Ashmore will approve it. He'll forward the email along to John Scott, and then John Scott will put it up on the school website. We talked about that and showed you where the school website was for the transportation schedule, so you need to be sure and look at that and determine if you've been able to take off. We talked about what the different number correlations are. Remember, if you're taking the vans are basically the front number in front of our vans or Suburbans or cars is the year model, and then the last number is telling you Dodge van, Suburban, cargo van, whatever it is. It assigns you which one it is. If you're not sure which vehicle you've been assigned, ask John Scott. He'll email you back and tell you you're taking this. But look at the transportation schedule first. And remember, after you email him, you need to be sure a couple days later and check to see that your transportation request was put on that website, and it's easy to go to. I think that he's actually got an app that you can actually download that, and it'll be sent to you on that app too. John Scott's not here. No one's agreeing. I think that he does. I guess no one in here does it or has it, but I really think he's got an app. That's something to ask John Scott about. Mr. Ashmore, do you know? He doesn't know either. I don't know. I really think he's told me he has. Okay, the next thing we talked about was our EOC dates. I gave you a list of all of the EOC dates and when they're coming up. They start really quick. I don't even have that actual sheet with me. I've got the deal telling you, I think the EOC English 1 on March the 29th may be our first EOC that we have to take. And so we need to be sure and plan on that. We've got all of our kids that are preparing for that, and we need to be able to support our teachers in all that they do and make sure that we have our kids here and prepared for the EOCs as much as we can. So again, if you've got a contest or a meeting or anything that you're going to take kids out of school on the day of an EOC, the answer is no, you cannot go. If it's the day before an EOC, you need to talk to Mr. Ashmore before you go to make sure that he's going to let you go. Because again, if you're going to be home late that night, he's going to tell you no. And depending on the kids, he may tell you no too. So be sure and ask. The last thing we've talked about was our days off. Remember, we're not going to take off on a Friday or a Monday before a weekend or around a weekend without approval. So that means if you go through and you got a doctor's appointment on Friday, then you need to be sure and try and reschedule it if you can. If you can't, you need to go talk to Mr. Ashmore and see if he can get approval to let you take off on that meeting on that day for your appointment. If you can, they're going to work around it. But if you're on that day, I was looking on here when I was looking at my calendar just now. There's one day in here that is crazy busy. I think I saw on Friday the 25th. Actually, yeah, Friday the 25th. That's Good Friday. Okay, on April the 22nd, we've got the UIL Regional Contest in Odessa. We've got the Tarleton State Contest that I'll be taking some kids to in Stephenville. We've got there's a track meet that day, a junior high track meet, and then there's a high school track meet that starts that night. So there's 4 or 5 things occurring on that same day. And so you figure your coaches, when you have a track meet, you're talking 4 or 5 coaches. Since the UIL academic meets that same day, you're talking probably 3 or 4 teachers that'll be going, depending on who all qualified. I'll be gone, and we'll have several teachers that are out that day. So it's really important that we don't take off on days like that. Now, if you take off on, there's a couple different Fridays in here that if you take off on March the 12th, there's nothing, or March the 11th, there's nothing scheduled for that day that I see. That doesn't mean there's not. It means that I didn't see it. But that day you might be more likely to get off because there's nothing else happening. But either way, if you're going to take off on a Friday or Monday after the holiday or after a weekend, you need to be sure and get prior approval. Okay. Other than that, I think that's all we were supposed to talk about. Okay. Thank y'all very much. I appreciate y'all showing up. I know it was a last-minute thing coming to the meeting today. I appreciate it. This is the second meeting y'all had to listen to me give or presentation. But I appreciate y'all listening and showing up. Hopefully, I'm sure I didn't cover it quite as good as Mr. Ashmore would have, but hopefully I covered all the information. If you have any questions beyond what I covered, of course, ask Mr. Ashmore. All that I know is what he told me. So y'all ask him, and he will be able to help you out. Aside from that, thank y'all very much, and hopefully this is the last one. Okay, real quick, I forgot to ask this a while ago. This was still part of the meeting. For part of the requirements of the course, my video, I've actually got to go through and ask y'all a couple questions. So I need to know, did I use my time wisely? Did I use some effective communication skills? Did I encourage collaboration between Mr. Ashmore and I, which he's shaking his head yes. I guess he's not going to talk. Did I have good listening skills? Did I hear your questions that you asked? And was the topic relevant? What about the use of time? Any questions or any comments?
You used your time fairly well.
Okay. Effective skills, listening skills, or actually I guess communication skills?
All the things you talked about were very important.
Okay. And then the encouraging collaboration. And then the listening skills and relevant topic. Was the topic relevant to what we needed to do?
Yes.
Okay. Cool. All right. Hopefully that covers the requirements. Thank y'all. My name is Jonathan Taylor, and I'm completing the reflection portion of my leading video for my educational administration classes that I'm taking through Lamar University. I just completed my video today. It was a little bit different because I had initially turned it in, but it was for reasons of time, it was not accepted, and so we had to go through and do it differently. So anyway, I just completed it today. I spoke to my principal and told him the issues that I was having, and we normally have a faculty meeting once a month. It's typically on a Wednesday morning, but since it was already too late to do that, well, our regular meeting would have been scheduled for next Wednesday morning. And so I asked him, and since that's too late for my purposes, in order to complete my program, I had to do it today. And so he let me give what would have been his next meeting, his meeting next week. He let me give it today, this afternoon actually. So anyway, I just completed that video. As we went through, I discussed some attendance procedures. We need to be sure and make sure everyone's actually taking attendance at the proper time. A lot of people are taking it at the end of the class period, or they're taking 2 or 3 class periods at a time, not doing it when they're supposed to. So we talked about that we need to be sure and take our attendance at the beginning of each and every class. We went through and talked about our transportation. We have to be sure and send all of our transportation requests through our principal now. We've been doing that all year, but some people just, I guess, haven't been taking care of that. And so we went through and you'll see those. Okay, we went through and discussed that we need to be sure and send our requests to the principal, and he will actually forward it to our transportation director. In the past, we went straight to the director. And so we talked about that. One of the questions was actually asking where we can find the transportation log. And so I had my computer there, and we got on to the PowerPoint, and I showed them exactly where to go to on the school website in order to actually to make that work. From there, we talked about EOC dates and the importance of the EOC tests. The fact that we need to be sure and not schedule any any games or any extracurriculars or anything on those days, so that we can make sure those kids have their full attention and do the best job on those tests that we can. We don't want those kids to be thinking about something else going on that afternoon or something they're missing because we took some kids to this game or contest and they didn't get to go. So we're just not going to go to any contest at all like that throughout our district. And so we talked about that. We also talked about the day before an EOC that you need to be sure and get approval. If it was something that would be done in the evening or an early deal, then it was going to be probably approved. But either way, if it was the day of an EOC or the day before, it needed to be approved. Well, the day of it wasn't going to be approved, and the day before it needed to be discussed. So we talked about that. And then the final thing we talked about, what was the final thing we talked about? Let me look back at my notes here. The final thing we talked about was days off. We have to get approval for the principal to take off the day on a Friday or a Monday. Since it's spring, we've got so many different sports going on. We've got basketball still playing. We've got both boys and girls. They both made playoffs, and so they're still playing. We've got tennis, track, golf, UIL, one-act play, band, FFA. We've got so many things that the kids are going so many different directions that we just don't have enough substitutes to cover all of those. And so we talked about that you need to be sure if you're going to miss a day, a personal day, that you need to be sure and get prior approval at least a week ahead of time instead of just assuming you can take off. We're only going to, basically the school's only going to allow us to take off on Fridays or Mondays in case of an emergency. So that's going to change what we had to be sure and talk about. From there, that was pretty much what the meeting discussed. I had a few questions during the middle of it. Like I say, I had to go through and talk about the attendant or the transportation log, where that's located, and then we had some questions about being able to take off work on a Friday, and so we had to kind of go through and elaborate on that a little bit more. Other than that, I thought it went really well. On my reflections, I'm supposed to do here. Reflect on the tool you selected and how it helps support groups and consensus building or the change process. The tool I used was just a general, I had some handouts with the agenda and a couple of sheets that had the dates and attendance and procedures on there. I handed those out, and then the main tool was just an actual meeting. We used the meeting itself as the tool to discuss what we needed to be done. I actually used my computer and the overhead to show how the transportation log is actually done, so that was a tool that I used there. Reflect on how you think you did preparing for and leading the faculty meeting, include feedback received. I thought it went fairly well, especially for a very short notice meeting. I thought it went really well. I thought it was a good meeting, and overall it was a success. There really wasn't much feedback. Really only one teacher even had anything to say, and it was all positive, but there was very little feedback that I got back during the actual meeting. Reflect on the development of your mock press release and feedback research. Reflect on communication issues between the community and the campus. The communication issues went really well. I thought that it was an easy process. I thought that the school communicated just fine. Like I say, I really appreciate that my principal let me do this meeting on such short notice, knowing that he definitely didn't have to. So I appreciate him letting me give basically his meeting ahead of time. He went through and we discussed what needed to be talked about during the meeting. We talked about the agenda. And so I really appreciate that. And that's one of the things I love about my school is that we have an administration that's very willing to work with its staff. And again, the staff was able to come together, and it was a last-minute meeting, and so they did a good job, and everyone showed up, and it was a very good meeting. I wish I could have gotten more discussion or more feedback during it, but that's pretty typical. We got a pretty laid-back staff. Everyone's been around long enough that there's not a whole lot they're going to say typically. But anyway, I thought it went really well. I thought the meeting was a success. I feel like I got the information relayed fairly well. I think it went well. So anyway, that's the reflection for my video, and thank you very much.